how long after you read the Quran did you become Muslim? And also, like, what did your Saudi friends that were not so like practicing, what did they do when like you became Muslim, and like what was the reaction?
Well, the reaction was they were excited. You know, Mahmoud, the guy who took me to the San Francisco bar scene, he started coming to the mosque to see if I really did convert to Islam. I didn't tell him. And he heard about it, and he said, "You're kidding." He said to the other Saudis, "You're joking." You know, there was a Saudi bar crowd that I always used to hang around with. You hear about that? What? You became a Muslim. Mahmoud said, "No, you're S-H-I-T-ing me." That's what he said. "No, you're kidding me." No, they said, "Really?" So he started coming to see if I was there, and he found me there. You know, and he became very devout after that. He did, really. And most of the members of the family, but they were kids, you know, they were going through the wayward years of youth. They were probably going to get there anyway. But they're all very, you know, they're very moderate, but they're very, they're very devout people. They're very nice devout, not the severe kind. You know, there's a lot of religious people. We confuse severity with religiosity. Oh, look at that person. He's so mean and he's religious. He must be really religious. Thank you. Well, are you tired? You want to go home? Okay. If there aren't any more questions, doesn't seem to be any more questions. More details of this are written in my 3 books. I'm not encouraging you to buy them, honestly, although my publisher would love them if I do this. But if you're interested, I guess even Angels Ask talks a little bit more about these theological issues quite a bit. And Losing My Religion, A Call for Help, has a chapter, it's about 100 pages long, that also discusses this. I think the two combined, you know, pretty much contain most of my thoughts on that, up to that stage of my life. Of course, as you grow and you learn and you experience, keeps enriching your understanding of these issues. Oh, one last question.
Thank you for your interesting presentation. Briefly, what people know who have never read the Quran, what they know about Quran is the stories about war and fighting, and the story about women. Could you comment these 2 things, please? Briefly.
War and fight. Yes, you know, there's a verse in the Quran, you know. Fight them in line, wait in ambush, whatever. In the 9th Surah, Surah Al-Tawbah, verse 5, has a very warring tone. It talks about making war on certain people. It's often quoted by people who have a grudge against Islam and say, "See, Islam promotes violence." But if you look just before that, it's very clear. The verses just before that and after that speak about people who have treaty obligations with the Muslims, peace treaty obligations, and then they break them and they violate those treaties and commit aggression against the Muslims. They were fighting for their self-survival at that time, in self-defense. And so it talks about people who break their treaties, and this is how you deal with them. You know, and it has a very bellicose tone. And when that verse was revealed, the tribes that were the enemies of the Muslims at that time, that were trying to exterminate this new community, when they heard that very bellicose tone, you know, they had their spies inside Medina, and they immediately went and told, you know, the enemy tribes, you know, the disbelievers, this is the relation cave, they're coming at you. Listen what it said. The end result was it led to the peaceful conquest of Mecca, and very little bloodshed, virtually none. So actually, the end result was peaceful. But the long and the short was so it justified violence only against aggression. And in that particular context, because you could often hear that verse recited, the 5th verse of Surah Al-Tawbah, just read the verses before and after. It talks about, context is quite clear. It's about those who break their treaties. And it says about those who don't break their treaties, keep your peaceful relations with them and honor those treaties. And that's similar. You know, just to give you an example, in the Quran, some have tried to make out the case that the Quran endorses violence and aggression. Some Muslims have. And when they do that, I remember that in their argument they had to write that that verse that I just mentioned canceled 254 verses of the Quran enjoining peace and only fighting in self-defense, with the non-Muslims. 254 verses that had to cancel. That's a good indication of what the Quran really says. Had to make that sort of massive cancellation. You be sure that must be violating what the Quran says in general. Quran says don't commit aggression. Even says, somebody, if they seek peace, you seek peace. And don't worry about it. God will defend you. Even because a lot of times we think, oh, now that they seek peace, jump on them, now kill them, wipe them out. This is our chance. The Quran says they seek peace, you seek peace. God is the best of defenders. But the long and the short of it is, I'm just trying to run through this quick. The Quran really, as far as I understand it, and I think almost any objective reader would, if you look at all the verses, and that's the way you should approach the Quran. When you're dealing with any subject, get out all the verses that deal with it. Massive, amount of verses joining only fighting in self-defense or against veritable oppression. Now let's see. What was the other one about women? Oh, that's a long subject. I'm a little bit tired, but yeah, there's very little legislation in the Quran. Again, it's a matter of how you interpret it, through what cultural lens you interpret it. If sure, you can interpret the verses again about women in the Quran. They have to do with a legislative capacity, dealing with problems that existed in 7th century Arabia at that time. You can interpret it. The fact of the matter is, you can take almost any scripture, and if you want to justify oppression of women, or if you want to, I'm not even going to say oppression of women, a certain perspective that you have, cultural perspective, you can usually make out an argument. There are often tenuous arguments that you can make it out. But a lot of that is determined, a lot of ways, we have to face the fact that, first of all, a lot of the claims against Islam simply aren't true when it comes to that issue. And some are. Some of the scholars in the past interpreted the faith in a very old-fashioned way. They were products of their time and place, and the assumptions of that time and place. We have a right and a duty to go back and look at those interpretations and critique them, because we have 1,400 years we have hundreds of years of experience since, to see if those interpretations make sense, to see if they're tenuous, to critique them and to be self-critical. And that kind of research is currently being done, and more of it needs to be done. The long and short of it is, though, I don't believe that truly the message of the Quran is oppressive towards women. Just the contrary. But it would take me some time to argue that.